I don't know what made me buy a ticket home early. Maybe it was exhaustion after 3 weeks of nonstop work in Tokyo. Or maybe it was a strange feeling, like something was waiting for me at home, ready to explode. I wasn't going to break the plan. Ryan had promised to pick me up from the airport on Monday night. He said there would be a nice dinner with candles, wine, and a long, suffocating hug. But on Friday morning, I couldn't sit still in my 12th floor hotel room. I booked the earliest flight, didn't tell anyone. I wanted it to be a surprise. On the flight, I imagined countless scenarios. I opened the door. Ryan was cutting vegetables in the kitchen. He turned around, stunned. "You're back?" and hugged me, spinning me around, laughing like a child. Maybe that night I would take out the ring I had hidden in my suitcase for half a year, but never dared to give it to him. I used to be afraid of commitment. And Ryan? He used to say that as long as we were together, that was enough. I believed it. The taxi stopped at the end of the street where I had lived for the past 6 years. It was autumn, and the yard was covered with fallen leaves. But what caught my attention first was not the peacefulness. It was the row of cars parked in front of my house. 6 cars, some familiar, like Ryan's mother and Sophie's. But others were unfamiliar. Unfamiliar license plates. Unfamiliar paint colors. In front of my house, where it used to be just Ryan and I, were pastel balloons. Pale blue, pale pink, pale yellow, and a linen banner dangled between the gateposts. "Welcome our little sunshine, Ryan and Juliet." I was speechless. It took my mind almost a minute to process the 2 names on that line of text. Ryan, Juliet. Juliet? No way. Juliet was my best friend, the one I let stay with for 2 years when she lost her job. The one I comforted through sleepless nights when her boyfriend cheated on her. I walked closer to the gate. The balloons glistened in the sunlight as if mocking me. My hands shook as I pushed the door open. It was unlocked. I walked into the house. Stevie Wonder's "Isn't She Lovely" blared from the Bluetooth speaker I'd set up in the kitchen. The song I'd said I'd use for my baby shower. And then I saw them. Juliet, in a white lace dress hugging her 6-month pregnant belly, stood in the middle of my living room. She had her hand on her belly, her face radiant, surrounded by laughter and well wishes. Some I knew, some were strangers, like strangers in my own home. Ryan's mother, Eleanor, was stroking Juliet's belly with a happy smile on her face. My mother, Deborah, was pouring juice for the guests, as if this was her own party. "Is the baby's room ready?" a woman asked. Juliet smiled softly. "Almost." Ryan wanted to decorate everything himself. He came every weekend to paint the walls, install the furniture. He said it had to be perfect for our daughter. Our daughter, I felt myself choking. My ears were ringing. But my footsteps, heavy, repeated. And then he appeared. Ryan. He emerged from the kitchen, carrying a tray of cakes and several cocktails. His face was bright with pride as he set the tray down on the table, wrapping his arms around Juliet from behind, his hands on her stomach, his cheek pressed against her hair. "Only the crib left. We ordered it last week." I stood in the middle of the living room, still unnoticed, until my wallet fell to the floor. Pop. The whole room went silent. Juliet was the first to turn around. Her eyes widened, one hand reflexively covering her stomach. "Claire, I didn't think you'd be back so soon." Ryan turned. His face was pale. His hand dropped from Juliet's stomach, but it was too late. The sight was burned into me like cold steel. I looked around, at my mother, his sister. Each had a look of avoidance or of cold indifference. "Claire, I think we should talk privately." My mother spoke, her voice like a tightrope walker. I raised an eyebrow. "About what, Mom? About me finding out my best friend is pregnant with the man I've been living with for 3 years? Or about everyone here knowing, except me?" Ryan stepped forward. Please, let's talk privately. I held up my hand to stop him. No, Ryan, we'll talk here. Congratulations to your little angel older brother. Juliet burst into tears. I didn't want it to turn out like this. I chuckled. Oh, so you call it not wanting to? After sleeping with my boyfriend in my own house? I turned to Ryan's mother, who had called me the daughter she never had. How long have you known? Just the last few weeks, she faltered. Juliet has been stressed out. She needs stability. Stable? I had a miscarriage last year, which she called no big deal. Now Juliet's baby is being called a little angel. I couldn't stand it anymore. I turned to all of them. You can continue the party, but remember, everything here is mine. This house is mine, and from tomorrow, none of you are allowed to set foot here again. I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer. Marcus, I need you to activate the house transfer contract and the illegal use of property lawsuit immediately. I looked at Ryan. His face was drained of blood. You made a choice. Now live with it. And I left home. No looking back. No crying. No breaking down. I walked out of the house I once called home. Now just the empty shell of a dead dream. I walked away from the house I had paid for 3 years without looking back. Not because I didn't want to, but because I knew that if I looked back, I would collapse. And they didn't deserve to see that. I got in my car and drove aimlessly. Nowhere in particular, just far away from what had just happened. When I found myself parked in front of a riverside hotel, my hands were still gripping the wheel, my knuckles white. I checked in for 3 nights. The receptionist looked at me with concern. I knew I looked like I had just escaped an accident. I just smiled a crooked smile. It's okay. I just need a place to breathe. The room was small and simple, but had a window facing the river. The first thing I did when I got in was turn off the lights and throw myself on the bed. Didn't change clothes. Didn't wash my face. Just lay down and started crying. But not the silent kind. I cried like someone whose heart had been ripped out while still alive. I sobbed, my shoulders shaking. Every emotional thread in my body felt like it was being ripped apart. I didn't cry for Ryan. I didn't cry for Juliet. I cried for myself, for believing, for sacrificing, for using everything I thought was the best in me to love someone, to help someone else. And suddenly, I was rewarded with a pastel puff of cotton and a firm handshake. The next morning, I got dressed and went to the law office of Marcus Wynn, the lawyer I had partnered with when I bought the house 3 years ago. He didn't judge, didn't ask further. He just asked, "Where do you want to start?" House, property, legal rights. I want Ryan to not get a penny of what I create. Marcus nodded. Everything is in place. You're the sole title holder on the property, and all payments are made from your own account. He has no legal obligation. I breathed a sigh of relief. Then I continued. I want to file a lawsuit for illegal use of property, for honor, for betrayal. Marcus looked up at me. Betrayal is not a legal reason. I know, but I wanted to write it down. I wanted a copy to remember that I survived. I handed over all my papers, statements, bills, emails, messages. Everything I had kept out of habit now became a weapon. Just an hour later, Marcus sent Ryan and his family an official notice to vacate the house within 15 days, to prohibit access to the property, and to prepare documents to file a lawsuit. That afternoon, I got a text from Ryan's mom, then Sophie, then Ryan himself. I don't read. Just remember one thing, the one who beautifies my heart may beg, but I will not be the same. The 4th day after the horrible party, I returned to my house with Marcus and a local police officer to file a transfer of property. Within 15 minutes, we had all the paperwork in place to begin the repossession process. What I didn't expect was, Ryan was still there, Juliet wasn't. He sat alone in the living room, rumpled, his hair disheveled, his eyes sunken, no trace of the man who had stood in the middle of the room celebrating the baby's birth with a beaming smile. "Claire?" He jumped up when he saw me. "I can explain." I held out my hand, signaling him to sit down. "No need. I came to inform you. This is the last time you will sit in this house." Marcus took out the file and began reading the terms. I looked at Ryan silently. He was shaking. "Are you really going to chase me away?" I smiled. "For the first time in days. I'm not chasing you away. I'm taking back what's mine." Ryan bowed his head. "Juliet left. She couldn't handle the pressure. I can't leave you now." "Oh, so she ran faster than I thought." I raised an eyebrow. "And no, I may leave you. I need to leave you. You chose this, Ryan." Marcus slid the file in front of Ryan. "You have 72 hours to remove all personal belongings from here. After that, the locks will be changed. If you do not comply, we will seek enforcement." Ryan didn't sign right away. He stood up, turning away as if holding back tears. "I know I was wrong, but you can't be that cruel." I moved a step closer to him. "You called revenge with a baby shower with my best friend. What is it? Humanity?" He was silent. I took a deep breath. "You know what? The most painful thing isn't that you slept with Juliet. It's that your whole world, your mother, your sister, your friends, knows, and no one thought I deserved to know the truth. You made me a fool of my own life." I turned away. That's what I can't forgive. I moved back into the house a few days later. No one in Ryan's family dared to approach me, except for a phone call from his mother, Eleanor, asking to meet. I declined. I no longer needed to talk to people who only showed up when I was lost. Surprisingly, I started sleeping well again. Not because the pain was gone, but because I felt like I had regained control. I returned to work. My colleagues greeted me with silent hugs and knowing glances. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need pity. I needed focus. After 2 weeks, Attorney Marcus reported, Ryan had dropped his name from all property disputes and agreed to move out without any demands. There was only one condition. I would not make the matter public. I agreed. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood. What I did didn't need anyone to know, just, I know. And that's enough. 3 weeks after the incident, I received a letter with no sender name, but the handwriting was immediately recognizable. Juliet's. She apologized, said she was jealous of me, of the way I loved, the way I lived, the way people always believed in me. Said she never thought it would go this far. That she was living with a distant aunt in Montana. That she had a miscarriage. I put the letter down. Silence. I wasn't happy. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't in pain. I just felt at peace. Like closing a final book, not because I had forgiven the story, but because I knew my chapter in it was over. I moved my temporary office to a small co-working space downtown. The room was light-filled, with large windows overlooking the square and the sound of coffee coming from the cafe below. It wasn't as fancy as the corporate headquarters Ryan had shown his friends, but it was the first place I felt like I belonged. Be yourself after all. I started writing. Not a report, not a pitch deck, but each line, each word, I write as if I were pulling out each thorn from my flesh. The story of a woman who devoted her youth to an unworthy man. About a best friend who became a silent enemy. About a child who was never born but changed everything. One day, I took the manuscript to my old editor, Danielle, who had helped me edit my first self-help book, which I had written for fun 3 years earlier. Danielle finished reading and said, Claire, this is not just a story, this is liberation. I asked, do you think anyone would like to read it? She looked at me squarely. Not only do people want to read, they need to read it. I didn't object. I sent the manuscript. Within a week, 3 publishers called. One even offered me a deposit if I would record an audiobook in my own voice. That evening, I sat alone by the window, a bottle of cheap wine and a printout of my first publishing contract. I looked at my name on the paper, Claire Evans, and suddenly wanted to change it. Not because I hate the name, but because I don't want someone to Google me and see Claire, the girl who was betrayed by Juliet and Ryan. I want to be Claire from then on. And so, I used a new name, Claire Wilder. Little did I know that just a few weeks later, the new title would become a mini phenomenon. The book was released digitally first, and in its first week, it climbed to the top 10 in the Women in Healing category on Amazon. I started getting letters from women who had never met me. The letters were shaky. Your story is eerily similar to mine. Or, thank you for putting into words what I couldn't name. I cried when I read a letter from a 21-year-old girl who wrote that she called off her wedding after reading the chapter, The House Without a Soul. She said, I realized that if I were to continue, I would be you, before you escaped. I decided to do something I never thought I would. Start a podcast. I'm not a good talker, but I can tell stories. And I started telling them. Podcast called Wilder Than Before. The first episode is just a 9-minute short where I talk about the day I walked into that party and saw my best friend holding her pregnant belly. I thought no one would listen. But 3 days later, I was invited to participate in a morning talk show on the local station. Around the same time, I received an email from Juliet's lawyer. It contained a request for financial support. The reason? She was having serious mental health difficulties after the recent incident, could not afford the hospital bills, and had no family to support her. I read that email 3 times. Then I called Marcus. I have no obligations to her, do I? No, Marcus replied. Unless she can prove legal dependence, which is completely impossible. She doesn't owe Juliet anything. I texted back a line. I wish you a speedy recovery. I recommend you seek out a women's community support center. A month later, I attended the Women in Business conference in Austin. I sat in the front row, not expecting to be asked to speak. But when the moderator asked, who here has ever been underestimated by those closest to them? A flood of hands shot up. I raised my hand too, and she pointed at me. You. Do you want to share? I stood up. My heart was pounding, but my voice did not tremble. I was the one who paid all the bills in a relationship that my boyfriend said would pay back when it worked out. But when I returned from Tokyo, I discovered that he had not only cheated on me, he had also thrown a baby shower with my best friend in the house I was paying for. The hall was silent, and I thought I wouldn't survive that night. But here I am, and I will never apologize for choosing myself. The applause was not loud. It exploded. After that event, my podcast listenership increased 5-fold. I was invited to speak at universities, conferences, and someone even suggested I run a feminist media campaign. But what surprised me the most was a message from an anonymous account. It contained just 3 words. Kyle is my son. I thought it was spam. Until a week later, I received a letter from Ryan's attorney asking for a paternity test and paternity verification. I stiffened. Kyle, the child I thought never existed, the child who was an excuse to betray me. And now, maybe living somewhere, without a father, without a mother. I didn't sleep that night. All the memories came rushing back like a movie in reverse. I opened my phone and dialed Marcus's number. We need to talk about this kid named Kyle. Claire, you have the right to refuse to intervene, Marcus said clearly at the meeting the next morning. The child is not yours legally, but if you are going to step in, you need to be prepared for this to go very far. I sat silently in the conference room, staring down at my cold cup of coffee. My mind was filled with only one name, Kyle. I used to think that the child was a symbol of betrayal, but now it has become a symbol of a larger question. Can I forgive a child for his parents' mistakes? I asked Marcus to file for temporary custody, not because I wanted to adopt Kyle, but because I need to see the boy before making any decisions. That same afternoon, I was called to the county emergency child care center, where Kyle was being cared for as an abandoned child. When I entered the room, Kyle was sitting in the corner, holding a worn stuffed bear, his big black eyes darting. "Hello," I said softly, sitting down on the floor opposite. The boy said nothing, just looked at me. I noticed his eyes were strangely similar to Ryan's, but pure Ryan. Ryan before he knew how to lie. "Do you like to draw?" I asked, pulling a box of crayons from my bag. Kyle didn't answer, but he moved closer and took the pen. We sat drawing for 20 minutes, no words. But as I stood up to say goodbye, Kyle tugged on my shirt. His voice was barely a whisper. "Are you coming back?" I stopped. I nodded. "Have." The next week was a series of days where I went to see Kyle and prepared the paperwork to file for formal guardianship. Ryan, by law, had the right to object, and he did so. He hired a young lawyer, argued that he had legal rights to be the father, had signed the birth certificate, and was only experiencing temporary hardship. Marcus sighed. "We have to hit on incompetence. That's the truth." I provided all the records, the recording of Ryan apologizing, the text messages he sent asking for help, the evidence that he had abandoned the child. Most importantly, the certificate from the hospital where Juliet had left Kyle, where my name was listed as the person who had taken him in for voluntary care. The trial took place 2 weeks later. The courtroom was packed. The media was not allowed in, but news of the case spread all over social media, especially when my podcast started mentioning a child abandoned by his parents. The judge was Mrs. Gloria Sanders, an older woman with neat silver hair and sharp eyes. She looked at me first. "Miss Claire Wilder, why do you want to take custody of Kyle when he is not related to you by blood?" I stood up. My heart was pounding. I didn't give birth to Kyle, but I came when he was left behind. I cared for him, comforted him, and listened. Kyle didn't need someone who shared his DNA. He needed someone to select to stay with it. The whole courtroom was silent. Ryan's attorney objected, saying he was trying to rebuild his life, had parental rights, and had planned to raise the child with Juliet. Marcus countered with psychological records, hospital camera footage, and nursing testimony that Ryan never once showed up. I didn't turn to look at Ryan. I was afraid I would soften. After 3 hours of debate, the judge called for a recess to deliberate. I went out into the hallway and sat down on a chair. Elijah, the journalist friend who had interviewed me, appeared with 2 cups of hot tea. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded slightly. "I don't know. I've never seen a trial that felt like it was trying my heart." Elijah sat down beside him. "I was an abandoned child. I wish someone had said what you said today." I turned. "And now you're here," he smiled, "to make sure there is a Claire like this in the world." An hour later, the court reopened. Judge Sanders looked around. Then he said, "After considering all the evidence and the wishes of the child, the court has decided to grant formal guardianship to Ms. Claire Wilder." The hammering sounded like a new declaration for my life. I didn't laugh. I didn't cry. I just turned to Marcus and let out a deep breath. "I have a baby," I whispered. I didn't celebrate that night. I just went home and prepared Kyle's bedroom. I hung a star-shaped nightlight from the ceiling, something I'd wished I had as a kid. When Kyle first walked in, he ran up to me and hugged my legs, whispering, "Miss, I didn't dream today, did I?" I knelt down and held the boy in my arms. Number today, we truly are a family. Life after a custody hearing isn't a fairy tale, but it is a proper start. I relearned everything, from how to prepare breakfast for a 4-year-old, to how to answer naive yet heartbreaking questions like, "Who is your mother? Will your father come back?" I don't hide the truth, but I choose to tell it with kindness. That your mother was a scared person, and your father wasn't ready to be the father you deserved. Kyle didn't ask many questions, but there were nights when I heard him mumble a name in his sleep. Juliet. I didn't intervene. I just opened the door quietly, stepped into the room, pulled the covers over him, and waited until his breathing calmed. One day, while I was cooking dinner, Kyle asked, "Claire, can I call you Mom?" I turned back. The knife was halfway through the carrot cutting board. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I stepped back, crouching down to her level. "You can call me whatever makes you feel safe." Kyle nodded. "So, Mom, I got to draw a bear in class today." I laughed out loud. You almost brought tears to my eyes. After the guardianship was officially granted, the media started to pay attention. My podcast, now with over 1 million listeners, was asked by a lot of people. "Claire, are you going to continue with the story about the child?" I hesitated. I didn't want Kyle to be the focus, but I also knew that there were thousands of million children out there waiting for someone to speak for them. I decided to tell. But I didn't say Kyle's name. I just said, there was a kid. No one chose him, but now he knows he's worthy of love. One evening, I received an email from Ryan's mother, Eleanor. Title: I want to see my grandchildren. I didn't answer right away. I thought about it for 3 days. Then I asked her to meet me at a quiet coffee shop. I didn't bring Kyle. She arrived on time. Her eyes were sunken, her hair was disheveled. She no longer had the elegance she once had. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me," she began. I nodded. "I came to listen, not to argue. Ryan is in therapy. He lost everything after Juliet disappeared, and the child was awarded to her." I squeezed his hand. "Ryan doesn't lose Kyle. He left this boy." She looked down at her tea. "I am sorry for not protecting you. I thought my child was happy. I was blind." I was silent. "Just give me a chance to get to know him, even if it's just for a day in the park. I won't call you Grandma if you don't want me to. I just want to see that he's okay." I put my hand on the table. Kyle is a smart, strong kid, but everyone who comes into his life now has to commit. Never leave again. She nodded. Her eyes were wet. The following weekend, I took Kyle to the park. I didn't tell him who was coming. As Eleanor walked up, Kyle turned to me and asked, "Mom, who is this?" I sat down and held my child's hand. "My child, this is your grandmother. She is the mother of the person who gave birth to you." Kyle looked at her for a moment. Then he turned to me. "Is she staying?" I looked Eleanor straight in the eye. She nodded, choking back tears. "She is not going anywhere." Kyle smiled, then timidly stepped forward and gave her a gentle hug. I turned away, not wanting them to see my eyes welling up. One evening, after Kyle had gone to sleep, I sat on the balcony, turned on my computer, and continued writing the second draft. Wilder's Little Corner. This time, it's not a story from the wound, but the scar has healed. The first chapter I wrote was, "Motherhood is not about giving birth. It is about staying when others leave." A few weeks later, I received an invitation to give a TED Talk. The topic: Overcoming Betrayal with Choice. I prepared my speech, and in the end, I said, "I used to think that forgiveness was the weakest thing I could do, but actually, it is the most brave. Forgiveness does not mean forgetting. It means choose not to let that wound control you." The whole room stood up and applauded. I bowed my head, but inside I thought of Kyle, the only person who had helped me understand it. That night, I came home to find Kyle asleep on the sofa, the picture book falling from his hand. I gently carried him back to bed and tucked him back in. Before leaving the room, I heard the boy dreamily say, "Mommy, I'm so happy today." I stood there for a long time. It was the highest award I have ever received in my life. My second book, Wilder's Little Corner, was released less than a week ago and has already shot to number 2 on the National Inspirational Autobiography charts. But I know this time, success isn't about me. It's about we, me, and Kyle, the story of an abandoned child and a betrayed woman who found each other as the last 2 pieces of a cracked map. But not everyone is happy about that. One Monday morning, I received a text message from Danielle, my book editor. Claire, I need to check Twitter. I opened my phone. Keywords number Wilder Lies was trending. Hundreds of posts, many of them fake, started circulating. That I made up the whole story about being betrayed to sell books. That Kyle is not Ryan's child. That I took advantage of an orphan to make a name for myself. I stood there, stunned. My hands were shaking. An anonymous account released a fake DNA scan with results that denied paternity. A video montage of my TED Talk distorted my words. I called Marcus right away. We need legal action, now. I'm working with the forensics team, he replied. But Claire, it sounds like this was very well orchestrated. It wasn't a hoax. I closed my eyes. Ryan? Maybe. Or Juliet's old agent, or an anti-feminist group. You've become a huge icon and not everyone wants that. I decided to hold a press conference. Not to justify, but to speak clearly in your own voice. I stood on a small stage, with Kyle coloring behind me. I looked straight into the camera. I don't write books to make money. I write to survive. Kyle is not a media tool. He is the reason I keep living. If someone needs a DNA test, I will provide it. If someone needs to know the guardianship papers, I am willing to make them public. I have nothing to hide, but I will not be silent before the fabrication. The press conference was shared millions of times. The outpouring of support quickly outweighed the criticism. Former fans quietly spoke up. Independent journalists verified the facts and stood by me. But the biggest blow came from Kyle himself. One evening, while I was washing dishes, Kyle ran into the kitchen, his eyes shining. Mom, the teacher asked me if I wanted to share my family story. I said yes. I turned back, a little startled. What did you say? Kyle laughed. You said, your mother is the bravest person in the world. Not because she is good, but because she chews when no one else will. I stopped. The water in my hand was still flowing and I was speechless. I walked over and hugged my child tightly. Thanks for believing in me, Mom. The following week, Kyle was invited on stage at a children's book reading I hosted. When the host asked, Kyle, what do you want to be when you grow up? He didn't hesitate. I want to be like Mom Claire, someone who is fearless, doesn't give up, and knows how to listen. The whole hall was silent. Then it exploded. Ryan showed up just as things were starting to calm down. He sent a nearly 2-page email, apologizing, taking responsibility, and asking for permission. See you, Kyle. Marcus advised me not to agree. But I knew Kyle was an adult and had a right to know the truth. I told my child, if one day you want to meet the person who gave birth to you, I won't stop you. But I want you to know the truth beforehand. Kyle was silent. Then he asked, have you ever hugged me? I'm not lying. No. It bowed its head. So, if I say I don't want to see you, will you be sad? I hugged my son. Mom would be proud, because you dare say what you want. Kyle nodded. Then I choose to stay. With you. I emailed Ryan back. Kyle refuses to see you. And I won't force him to change his mind. When he wants to, he'll find you. If you're still worth it. Ryan did not reply. But I know, this story, no matter how it ends, Kyle and I won. Not because of the trial, not because of the best-selling book, but because we chose each other. I thought Ryan was the final chapter of the surprise. But no. The person I never thought would come back to me came into my life like a storm. Juliet. The message came one Saturday afternoon, while Kyle and I were working on a jigsaw puzzle in the living room. Juliet. Claire. I know I'm not supposed to text, but I'm in town. I want to see Kyle. Just once. I stared at the screen. My hands were cold. The wall I had built around my memory of her, the one who had betrayed my friendship, my love, and abandoned my child, was crumbling. I didn't answer right away. I called Marcus. I need to know what legal rights she has over Kyle. No, he replied firmly. She signed a waiver, no strings attached. So what if she tries to pressure you? We have all the evidence of abandonment, and you have every right to refuse. But if you want to protect Kyle long term, you might want to consider going to court to get a restraining order. Revoke Juliet's right to refile. I understand. She could come back at any time. And Kyle doesn't have to live with the feeling that his mother who abandoned him could show up and take everything back. I arranged to meet Juliet at a quiet cafe. I went alone. She arrived, still looking fashionable, but her eyes were tired. Bags under her eyes were obvious. Thanks for coming, she said. I didn't smile. I didn't owe her that anymore. I came to listen, but if you mention wanting to be a mother again, stop right there. Juliet shrugged. I'm not trying to take anything back. I just want to know if he's okay. I chuckled. You haven't asked that in 4 years. She bowed her head. I had postpartum depression. My family forced me to go to Europe for treatment. After that, I didn't dare go back. I saw the news about you and Kyle. I listened to the podcast. I knew I was no longer qualified. So what is your purpose? Just a photo, or a view from afar. I don't want to disturb anything. I looked at her. Her eyes were no longer the eyes that had lied to me about her relationship with Ryan. They were the eyes of a broken woman. But I had learned my lesson. Not everyone who repents deserves forgiveness. I'll give you one thing, I said, pulling out a photo of Kyle smiling from a recent camping trip. But don't ever try to see him. If you really want what's best for him, then disappear completely. Juliet looked at the photo. She cried. But I didn't soften. The next day, I filed an emergency petition with the court asking for Kyle's biological mother's right to a retrial be completely revoked, with medical records and affidavit of extended absence. Court approved. Kyle is officially protected. That evening, I sat at the dinner table. Kyle was eating spaghetti and asked, Mom, did I ever have another mom? I was surprised. Why do you ask? At school, someone said, my biological mother is not like my adoptive mother. I took a deep breath. It is true that someone gave birth to you. But you know what? Giving birth to you does not make that person your real mother. Choosing your child, staying with your child, protecting your child, that's what a mother is. Kyle nodded, then smiled. Then you are my real mother. I smiled, tears rolling down my face. I am so proud to be your mother. I tell this story in a special episode of the podcast. I won't name names, just say, there are people who come back just to say they were sorry. But if they were truly sorry, they wouldn't ruin what was healing. True remorse doesn't ask for forgiveness. It is to let others be in peace. That podcast episode became the most shared episode. Some people called it a survival guide for those betrayed by a loved one. I'm not afraid of Juliet's ghost anymore, because Kyle is no longer alone. He has a mother, a family, the truth. And I am no longer let anger hold you captive again. We have entered a new chapter. No more ripples. But I know there's one thing that's not over. Ryan. Ryan returned, not with a simple apology, but with a lawsuit. I received notice from the court one October morning. Ryan was officially petitioned for reconsideration of paternity with Kyle. I read the complaint line by line in disbelief. He claimed he was deprived of his parental rights due to a misunderstanding and wants a chance to start over. Marcus looked at me, his face tense. We will fight. Claire, you did everything right. And Kyle? He deserves to live without the unpredictable return of someone who abandoned him. I said nothing. I thought of the look in Kyle's eyes when he called me Mom. I thought of the night he had a fever and I stayed up all night. I thought of the rushed breakfasts, the hugs at school, the times he sat on my lap and listened to stories. Ryan can't just come back when you see me and Kyle okay. The trial began the following month. Both the media and the public were watching closely. The incident was exposed online, dividing public opinion. Some thought the father should have been given a chance. Others sided with Kyle and me, saying the father is not the one who creates the child, but the one who stays. I kept calm. No retaliation, not a harsh word. On the day of the court hearing, I wore a simple black dress and clutched my papers. Kyle sat at home with Eleanor. Ryan walked in with his lawyer. He looked at me, a little regretful, but more confident. Maybe he thought he could win by blood. The judge, a woman named Judith with sharp eyes, asked the first question. Mr. Ryan, why do you only want to exercise your legal paternity rights now? Ryan stood up. Your Honor, I was in a slump. I lost my way when Juliet left and I was cut out of my son's life. I was not given a chance. Marcus retorted, himself exclusion. No child support, no inquiries, no reaction when Kyle officially became Claire's legitimate son. Ryan bowed his head. I regret it. I just wanted to be a small part of his life. I stood up. My voice did not tremble. Your Honor, I did not keep Kyle from the truth. I gave Ryan a chance, and Kyle did refuse. Not because I stuffed him. It was because Ryan himself never did anything to make him feel safe. I opened my tablet. A video showed Kyle in therapy when the therapist asked, if your dad wants to come back, what do you think? Kyle, I'm scared. I don't know if you'll go. I just want someone to never leave me again. The courtroom was silent. Judge Judith nodded thoughtfully. The court needs to protect the best interests of the minor. In this case, that is stability, safety, and trust. After a day of trial, the verdict was given. Ryan was not restored to his paternity. I breathed a sigh of relief, not because I had won, but because Kyle was no longer afraid. Ryan sat down on the chair. His eyes were red. I walked over. Ryan, I used to love you. I used to think you were a good person. But good people don't disappear when things get tough. He did not reply. I don't hate you anymore, but I don't owe you anything either. I turned away and left, closing the final door to the past. That day, I came home early to pick up Kyle from school. On the way, I stopped in the middle of the park and watched my son play with some kids. Kyle ran back, grinning. I drew you in class today. The teacher said I drew the best. I hugged my child tightly. In my heart echoed a very clear sentence. I chose you, and you chose me. It was the fairest judgment ever. A year after the trial, I stood in the middle of the TEDx New York auditorium, the spotlight shining on my face. Behind me were bright red letters. Choose to stay. I took a deep breath and began. There are people who appear in our lives like a shower. They come and go. They are beautiful but don't stay. But there are also people who are like a shower that we choose to stand below, even though I know I will get wet. I have chosen the wrong person, loved the wrong person, trust the wrong person. But there is one thing I have never regretted. Choosing Kyle. The speech was 18 minutes long. I didn't speak as a mother. I didn't speak as a victim. I spoke as a broken human being. Dare to put the pieces together with your own faith. Thousands of spectators stood up and applauded. Some cried. Some clasped hands with those around them. That evening, when I got out of the car at home, Kyle was waiting on the porch. Mom, you're so popular today. I laughed. How did you know? Ava said you were in my video. You were wearing a red shirt. You looked like Superman. I bent down and hugged my son. You are more than a superhero to me. You are the one who makes me believe in the world again. We had dinner with Eleanor, Kyle's step-grandmother, who had moved back to live nearby to care for him while I was away on business. It was a great laugh. Eleanor handed me an envelope. This is from Kyle's birth mother, from rehab. I held it, hesitating. But then I opened it. In the letter, Juliet wrote, "I know no words are enough, but thank you for doing what I couldn't do. I won't be coming back. But if Kyle ever wants to know, I'll leave you with this. Your biological mother may have given birth to you, but Mom is really the one who dares to stay." I didn't cry. I just folded the letter and put it in the wooden box where I keep my most important things. The following spring, I published my third book. This time, not an autobiography, but a children's book, The Boy Who Takes His Mother's Last Name. The book is about a boy named Milo, who is picked up by a woman at a bus stop, and together they learn to start a new life. Simple, warm, and real. The book was chosen as the reading theme for National Family Week. Kyle was the one who took the microphone to read the first page. Milo doesn't have a last name, but she said, "You can take my last name, because I will never leave you." The audience fell silent. And then, a round of applause. The boy bowed his head and ran to hug me tightly. When asked if he wanted to see his biological father again, Kyle always said, "I don't need to. I already have my mother. I don't force my child to change his mind. But I know that if one day he wants to, I will go with him. Not to redefine the past, but to let him understand that it was never abandoned, just picked up by the right people." In the season finale podcast, I said, "Some people think revenge is the last straw, but to me, revenge is the sweetest. No one can define their own happiness anymore. I don't need anyone's recognition. I don't need anyone's apology. I don't need a miracle. I just needed one kid to believe in me. And I got that." A year later, Kyle was officially renamed Kyle Claire Monroe, not because I forced him, but because the boy wanted to carry the name of the person who stayed behind. I signed my new birth certificate on a sunny afternoon. As I walked out of the administration office, Kyle held my hand, his eyes shining. "Mom, am I officially yours today?" I nodded, tears rolling down my face. Not just today, but for a long time. But now I also know that my story does not end in marriage or a fairy tale happy ending, which ends with a simple truth. The heart does not need anyone's permission to love. It just needs brave to stay, and I chose to stay.